All right, guys. Hello, good afternoon. This next video in our series is going to talk about how to create random numbers on your computer using Python. So we'll begin. I obviously encourage you to do this with me as I type. We are going to be creating a program to create random numbers in Python. There's a little bit of a process to this. Whatever your date is, whatever the period is, and whatever your name is, feel free to put that on there. There we go. So just like the math commands, you are going to need one of those external libraries. You're going to need the random external library this time. So just like with math, when you say from math import star, here you're going to say from random import star. When I say star, that's just the term we use for asterisk. So from random import the asterisk. So how does a computer generate random numbers? Well, you saw from the previous videos that computers can't just magically create random numbers. There's a little bit of a process. And what Python does is it uses your system clock. It's going to look at the exact month, day, year, time, down to the minute, the second. It's going to check that, and it's going to do what's called seeding the random number generator. It's basically this mysterious formula that's inside of the language that the thing is, you don't need to understand it. You don't need to understand the formula. All you need to know is how to use it. The computer will take care of the rest. So once again, we call these pseudo random numbers, the prefix pseudo meaning kind of, sort of. They're random as well as we're going to get on a computer. So let's do it. Here is the process. First, we're going to use the random number function. I'm going to print random, and it's a function, so we have parentheses both after it, left and right. There's no input into that. We're just saying print random. So what does this do? If I run the program, it gives me a decimal. Now, as we saw in the video, that number is not random unless you look at the context. Like, how do I know that every single time I run the program, it's not going to give me 0.602030 every single time? Well, here's how we can tell. Let's run it a couple times. I will go back here and run it, and now it gives me 0.1843. And if I do it a third time, it gives me 0.0908. So it sure seems like it's pretty random. But it's a random decimal. And if you notice, all the decimal, it never went above 1. Like, it was always point something, 0 point something. So what this does, the steps in generating a pseudo random number in Python are as follows. Step 1, use the random function to generate a value. Now, depending on what level math you're in, this may look a little bit different, but I'm going to do a number from 0 up to, but not including 1. So it could be anything from 0 up to 0.999999999, all the way, but never get to 1. Okay, so again, you guys that are at a high level of math, you have a square bracket 0, comma 1 with a parenthesis. Those of you that haven't quite gotten to interval notation, which I believe you learned maybe Algebra 2 pre-calc, which is perfectly fine. You don't need to know how that works, but you probably know it as something like this, where you have 0 and then less than or equal to x less than 1. You're saying it's the x, the random number, is between including 0 up to but not including 1. You also might remember in middle school doing the filled in circle, closed circle, open circle, like you shade the line. So 0 is shaded because it's included and then 1 is not. Okay. Does any of that really, truly, matter in the long run? No, because if I handed you a 6-sided die and I said, here, roll this, what good does a decimal do? We'll get to that. So what you do from there, step 2 is you multiply that by the range of numbers you want. So what does that mean? Well, again, I go back to my six-sided die. If I want 1 to 6, there's 6 outcomes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would multiply it by 6. If I have a random letter of the alphabet, there's 26 of those, so something times 26. The key thing to make sure you realize here, it is you multiply by the range of numbers. You don't multiply by the biggest number. It just happens to work out because the number on a die starts at 1. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. So the range is actually a formula. It's a formula that you take the highest value minus the lowest value and you add 1. And that's for any range. It's not just for random numbers, but any range. So if I do 1 to 6, again, like I'm talking about a random die roll, 1 to 6, you take the highest value, which is 6, minus 1, which is 5, plus 1, which is 6. If the lowest value is 1, the minus 1 plus 1 cancels out. So it always ends up being just the highest value. But that's if it starts at 1. So, again, on a die roll of 1 to 6, what you're saying there is what's 6 minus 1 plus 1? Well, that would equal 6. But if I had something like, a random number from, let's say, 10 to 20, right? You wouldn't multiply by 20. 20 is not the range. And the range is also not 10. If I gave you and I said, here's a math book, do homework problems 10 to 20, you're not doing 10 problems. You're doing 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You're doing 11 problems. So 20 minus 10 plus 1 would equal 11, not 10, not 20. So let's look at what that looks like with our code. So if I go down here and I say, okay, I'm going to multiply by 6, right? So if I have right now the range of 0 to 1, and I stretch that out with my multiply, 0 times 6 is still 0, right? Like that end of the number line does not move. It's still 0. But if you multiply 1 by 6, or something really, 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 really close to 1 by 6, you get something really, 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 really close to 6. So you're stretching out the range. You're still going to get decimals for the moment. So now, again, watch this. If I take that and multiply by 6, I get 1.58. I get 1.215. I get 5.6. All my decimals there are going to be between 0 and up to but not including 6 in this circumstance. So that's step 2. So what you need to do next, we have these decimals. We don't want decimals. When you're rolling a die, you don't get like 2.5 or 3.4. So what we need to do next is convert the random value to an integer using the int command. We've seen this before. Int input. Watch this. If I come down here and I say put int parenthesis around the whole thing, not just the random. You have to do random times and then you put it around the entire thing of that. Because if you put it around just random, if you make an integer out of something from 0 to 1, it's always going to be 0. So it won't work. You need to make it multiply first, and then the order of operations is you put int around that whole thing. So now, if you put int around that number, which goes from 0 up to but not including 6, you get 1, you get 4, you get 4. So, again, it's random. There's one last step here, because when you use the int command, what you have to realize is that the int truncates. We talked about that in the math video. The decimal. So in other words, it chops off any decimal places. So if you have something like, 1.89, it gives you 1. It doesn't round up. It's not rounding. So the thing is, if you have a decimal that is 0 point something, it won't go up to 1. Like if you have a 0.75, it's not 1, it's 0. So if you think about it, if you have all the decimals from 0 up to but never including 6, you still don't get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What you really get is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the final step of this, and I'll make it a little bit more succinct for you here in a moment. The final step is add the lowest value of your range to the end. So if I want +1 to get 1 to 6, there's my formula. That will give me the values from 1 to 6. So if you want to roll a dice, this will roll a 6-sided die. So in other words, it gives you the outcomes of 1 to 6. All right. I go back to my other example. What if I want to say pick a random number from 10 to 20, including both, including 10 and including 20. So we use the word inclusive for that. Well, for that, print int random times, again, it's not 10, it's not 20, it's 11 plus 10, parentheses. 11 because that's the range, 10 because that's the lowest number. That will give you numbers from 10 to 20. So you can do this with any range. If you have something up to something, you get this. So the final formula to create a random number in Python is you say int random times the range plus the lowest value. That's your formula. I guess I don't really need that parenthesis at the end there because it depends on, are you printing it, are you putting into a formula, are you putting it into a variable, something like that. So I'm going to take this video, take the contents of this video, and I'll show you the application of it in our next video. But let me just, again, let me show you a couple more examples. If you want to have not just printing, but if you want to have literally 2 dice rolls, let's say D1 and D2, and then you want to get the total. D1 equals int random times 6 plus 1. D2 equals int random times 6 plus 1. The total is D1 plus D2. So if I print D1, comma, D2, comma, quote, let's say total equals quote, comma, total. So you're printing, in the first column, you're printing the first die, then you're printing the second die, then you're printing the total equals the value. Just like a common board game. There's 2 6-sided die. So if I run this, it's going to give me 6 and 3 add up to 9. I can do it again. Let's say I get 5 and 5. 5 and 5 equals 10. So this is the method you're going to use to create random numbers in Python. Thanks a lot. See you in our next video.